All right. So, welcome. Hmm, This is strange. I just started. All right, welcome. And here we go.
For the January he walks abroad in woolen coat and boots of leather. The February man still wipes the snow from off his head and blows his hand. The man of March, he sees the spring and wonders what the year will bring, and hopes for better weather. In April rain, the man goes down to watch the birds come in to share the summer. The man of May stands very still to watch the children dance away the day. In June, the man outside the man is young but wants to lend a hand, and grins at each newcomer. And in July, the man in cotton shirts, he sits and thinks on being idle. The August man in thousands takes the road to watch the sea and find the sun. September man is standing near to saddle up another year. And autumn is his bridal. The man of New October takes the reins, and early frost is on his shoulder. The poor November man sees fire and wind, and mist and rain, and winter gale. December looks through the sun to let 11 brothers know they're all a little older. And the January man comes round again in woolen coat and boots of leather, to take another turn and walk along the icy road he knows so well. The January man is here at the start of each and every year, along this road forever.
All right. And welcome to Pagan FM. That was January Man by Dave the Bard from his 2012 album Antlered Crown, and Standing Stone. And welcome to Pagan FM. Welcome to 2026, coming to you from the home of the Jersey Devil. I'm Dee, and thanks so much for joining me. I've spent the past few days setting up something of a studio, going through some tech headaches. I had to use a secondary board tonight because my first one kind of crapped out. So if the audio is a little bit off, I apologize. Anyway, I've also been putting the final touches on tonight's episode. Hopefully, it comes out something meaningful. The studio is not complete yet, but hopefully somewhat functional, and I hope the content is at least informational. I'm going to start this show off with some gratitude, firstly to supporters. The first are the artists who signed up to support the show by permitting me to air their music. First of all was S.J. Tucker. Thank you for the Lord of the Rings reference. I really appreciated that, S.J. And Christopher Bingham, Celia Ferran, Dave the Bard, Featherscale, John Sidney McNair, Daniel Kelly, Looping Star, Crow Woman, Mayfair Grin, and the list is growing and growing as I contact and hear back from more artists. I appreciate you guys so much. If you are an artist and you'd like to hear your music featured on the show, just let me know. I'm working on a website and so many other things. There will be contact information available, or you can email me at deirdre@designed.net. Just working on things. It takes a lot of work to get this up. Also, thank you so much to listeners. You are so much appreciated. Anyways, for my South Jersey and South Jersey and Philadelphia area listeners, let's take a look at the forecast. Kind of getting back into the way I used to do things. Back when I did the show live at a radio station in Portsmouth tonight, it's going to be mostly cloudy with low around 22, west winds around 5 miles per hour. Friday, tomorrow, mostly cloudy, then gradually becoming sunny with a high near 35, light winds from the west increasing 5 to 10 miles per hour in the morning. Friday night, partly cloudy with a low around 20, west winds around 5 miles per hour. Saturday, increasing clouds with a high near 33, calm wind becoming west around 5 miles per hour. Saturday night, mostly cloudy, low around 24. Sunday, mostly sunny, high around 37. So mostly it's going to be at least until around Thursday. Well, actually, Tuesday we're going to get back up into the 40s. Wednesday, chance of rain with a high around 52. And Wednesday and Thursday in the 30s and 40s, so at least above freezing. All right. So, a little bit about the show. When I first announced that I was going to start the show back up again, one of the first comments came from a former co host, Jules, who said, "It's about," I'm not going to use the expletive that she used here, but it's about expletive time. Well, Jules, better late than never. And if you ever want to co host again, I think we might be able to arrange something via a remote. And now, let's talk about what I want to do with the show with Pagan FM. Firstly, I'm going to try like heck to do this weekly. So, again, I'm setting up a bit of a studio here. I'm going to try to make it as much like the old radio studio that I used to broadcast from as I can, up to and including a small FM transmitter that can reach out into the neighborhood. It'll be, FCC Part 15 legal, but folks nearby will be able to tune in. I'm rebuilding my music library, and as before, it will be curated. So, as I did pull artists from my library and episodes where I interviewed people who had turned out to have been offenders or people of bad character, There will be some artists who you might have heard on the program before who you might not hear again. But just because you don't hear someone, please don't take that to necessarily mean that they might have done something wrong. Again, I'm going through the process of regaining permission from artists to play their music on the show. Some people I haven't been able to contact. Some people I haven't been able to contact yet. Some of them have passed on. So it might just be that I can't gain their permission. Um, some people not yet. So don't take it if you don't hear from someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've done something wrong. On the other hand, you aren't going to hear people on this program if I have heard that they're they're either offensive people, as in, I'll get into my requirements for people whose music I play. So, to air someone's music on this show, here are my requirements. The group or artist should promote some sort of spiritual message. It doesn't need to be the sole purpose of the group, but somewhere they should be promoting something for the good of humankind, good for the planet. 2, the group or artist needs to be accepting of all people. That is, if they're anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-Christian, anti-Wiccan, anti-Muslim, anti-whatever, except for anti-bigotry, anti-fascist, I'm probably not gonna play it. Unless, number 3, that is, I'm using it as an example. I'm not gonna play anything that comes from a cult unless I'm using it as an example. So, there might be something if I'm showing say what a cult or some other organization does, how they entrap people, how they ensnare people. If I'm using it for something like that, then you might hear a snippet, but that would be it. So I will not be promoting organizations or groups like that. So what I hope to air for actual music for the benefit of listeners here is the best music by really good pagan artists who grant me permission to air their music on the show. You might hear music from other groups. There's some really great Sufi music out there that I really love, and music from other artists. So if I get permission to air that, I will as well. I just haven't been in touch with these people yet. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work to try and contact everybody, especially when you've got a full-time job. So if you are a listener and you would like to help out with the show, at some point, I will be getting a Patreon set up. That's not there yet. Uh, again, I'm doing this on my own. I don't have a radio station behind me. So it will help with the purchase of music, purchase of gear, that sort of thing. And that would be appreciated. That's not set up yet. It may happen in the future. I'll let you know if and when it does. To get started, and by way of reintroduction, get back to my page here. Anyway, to get back where I was, I haven't done this show in quite a few years, and since the last episode, I moved from New Hampshire back to the land of the or down to the land of the Jersey Devil, and I've been here for about 5 years, and I became a member of a Quaker meeting. Why, might you ask, if I'm a Quaker, am I back doing a pagan program? Well, there are some good questions in the world, and that's probably one of them. By way of an answer, I was at a Quaker meeting in New Hampshire some years ago, and someone asked what was the difference between a Shaker and a Quaker. And one man there replied that Shakers make good furniture while Quakers make trouble. Perhaps that's part of the reason for being back on the air. I've been seeing what's going on in the world, and I realized that when I was doing Pagan FM, I had a voice. And I feel that I need to exercise that voice again. I have a problem with the way right wing Christianity seems to be gaining an undue influence in the world, or at least in the US today. And I feel I need to stand up against that. But some of you might say, but Dee, you're a Quaker. Isn't that Christian? Well, sort of, but it's not Christian in the right wing conservative sense of the word Christian. It's Christian in the sense that I can accept the teachings of Christ, but not necessarily to the exclusion of others. I don't have to accept the creeds, the inerrancy of the Bible, or so many other things that define so many Christians. Anyway, here's basically what happened. I found my way back to a sort of Christianity after discovering that the particular pagan group that I was involved in was more of a cult. So let's start with the cult part. A simple definition of a cult is a group that exercises undue influence over an individual. In a legitimate religion or a legitimate group, you get to choose who your friends are. You get to choose where you can live. And importantly, you get to choose whether or not you can leave the group without bad things happening to you, such as threats or harassment. I had already realized that when I was growing up in a church where priests could come into my school, take me out of my classroom and out of the school, and, well, you can fill in the blanks. Later on, that church forced me into the military, convinced me that I was going to hell for the sin of being what I later learned was intersex. I realized later on that church was a legitimate cult. Later, I learned of a term called cult hopping, and that explained my younger years. While I was in the Air Force, I joined the Mormon church. And then shortly after getting out of the Air Force, I joined another church called The Bible Speaks. If you want to find out about that one, there are there's actually a 60 Minutes episode about that church that you can find on YouTube. So cult hopping was part of my life. I went through a number of churches. I grew up thinking that there was something wrong, something deficient in me, and that God could fix it. But I also thought that God could only be found in churches that were intense. And then in paganism, I also equated that intensity with authenticity. And so I found this intense group. Now, please don't take this to mean that all intense groups are cults. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if you're going to find a cult, you'll find it to be an intense situation. That's how they keep you there. The intensity is it instills a sense of urgency and um, a sense that what you're doing is important. So, in the leader of this group, when I told her that I was going to move to New Jersey, what did I hear? I heard, "Well, I'm old. You know this. You know that I'm gonna die soon. Why can't you wait until I die? And who's gonna take over when I die?" And it went on and on and on. And then there were phone calls, not just to me, but to my friends, even friends who weren't in the group, telling them what a horrible mistake I was making. And then there were comments like, "Well, I've got new members of the group, and I'm not gonna tell you who they are because I don't want you talking to them." That sort of thing is cult behavior. And even after I got to New Jersey, the calls kept coming, and I finally changed my number. That's okay, I guess, because I really wanted a New Jersey phone number. And 5 years on, the leader of this group is still alive. So here's some advice. Don't put your life on hold for anyone else. It's your life, not theirs. And before I wanna go on, I wanna add something about the idea of entering the circle in perfect love and perfect trust. Before you utter those words, make sure that that trust goes both ways and that those words are not empty. Um, I realize after I left that group that while I may have had that trust, that it did not extend in both directions. So there's a huge amount of discernment that really needs to go on. And I think a legitimate teacher is going to teach you how to exercise that discernment before you utter those words. Anyway, while this was going on, um, there was a there were some other instances in my life where I had met someone who was helping me to understand about my own past. And I was sitting at home dealing with some of the clergy abuse that I'd experienced as a child. And I heard this Mennonite choir singing a song called We Are Not Alone. It was by this man named Pepper Choplin. And it really moved me in part because in my younger days, music had been a huge part of my spiritual upbringing. And looking back, I realized that that's a tool of many cults. And I recall one specific retreat where I was one of the musicians working on this retreat. And it was during the Catholic charismatic movement. This was something of a blend of Catholicism and Pentecostalism. And we musicians there were playing a piece of music called the Adoramus Te. And it's a Latin hymn, and it only has 3 words. So I'm going to see. All right, here it is. I'm going to see if I can play a little bit of it here. We'll see how this works. So before I do, um, for people who were Catholics in, say, before the mid-70s or so, Latin was a big part of the church, and even for people who are younger and in parts of the Catholic Church now, there's still a lot of use of Latin. So it was the language of the church for centuries. So this song is super simple, but it gives so much room for harmony. And the words Adoramus te Domine, which it's so simple, but it just means I love you, God. And this is the way it goes. Ooh, Adoramus te Domine. Ooh, Adoramus te Domine. Ooh, Adoramus te Domine. Ooh, Adoramus te Domine. So anyway, it's super simple, but here's what was going on. Hmm. This would have been fine. Um, except The particular priest who was running it, again, he was later found to be one of those priests who was an abuser. Um, and before we started playing, he told the people gathered there that as this song was playing, they would feel the Holy Spirit come over them. So here we are playing and singing, and they're joining us in song. And there's these incredible harmonies building, and the dynamics of the music are shifting, and we're going into these highs and lows, and it was hugely emotional. And in about 10 to 15 minutes into this, I realized that we're just hypnotizing this entire congregation. We started thinking, as I was writing this program, about the idea of guided meditation. And here's the difference. In guided meditation, we're honest. We tell people that we're going to give you an experience, and we tell them what kind of experience it is. But even in a guided meditation, people have choices, and we don't tell them. We don't use trickery. We don't tell them something. We don't tell them that you're going to experience this when in reality it is something else. And that's what really bothers me about this whole thing. So, anyway, a few years later, it was some years later, back to this whole, um, back in New Hampshire. I met someone who became somewhat of an adopted sister who had also grown up in a cult, that she helped me to understand about cults and suggested that I look into a group called the International Cultic Studies Association. And it was there that I found a therapist who specialized in working with people who were recovering from cult experiences. That's what really helped me understand my own past. So from there, I moved to New Jersey, or, around the Philadelphia area. And I was thinking I might actually be Christian, and I began looking for a church, and every single one that I went to, I found something that triggered me. But I did realize that if I was gonna be part of a church, it was gonna have to be one of the peace religions, which meant in the area where I live, it was either gonna be Mennonite. Now, there are liberal Mennonites, so they aren't all like the, ones riding in buggies, or a Moravian, or a Quaker. Mm. So, I found the Quakers down here, and interestingly enough, the Quakers are very much like Unitarians. Difference being, um, so you don't have to be a Unitarian to be a Quaker. So Unitarian means that they don't believe in a Trinity. Whereas a Quaker, you can be Trinitarian, you can be Unitarian. You can be Universalist, you don't have to be Universalist, although I think most Quakers are probably gonna be Universalist. Um, Quakers do not have a creed, which I found to be something that I can kind of hang on to. It's like nobody is telling me what I have to or don't have to believe. I can be the curator of my own belief system. I've met Quakers who are Muslim, who are atheist, who are Jews, who are Christian, who are it's what matters to a Quaker is that there is something of whatever God is in each of us. And that's pretty much the defining thing. So Quakers believe in simplicity, peacefulness, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And that is their testimony. If that is what our beliefs are kind of expected to bring out in us. So I can hang on to that. As for my own beliefs right now, maybe I'm something of a really, really liberal Christian and somewhat unsure of what I really believe. I'm open to quite a lot. I have absolutely no problem hanging around in pagan circles, in Christian circles, in any group. I don't have a problem with whatever people believe, and I don't have a problem being around those beliefs. What I'm not open to is fundamentalism and conservative Christianity. I'm not open to other people telling me or anyone else what God says we should or shouldn't do with our lives, or what God says about who we should or shouldn't sleep with, or what God says our gender should or shouldn't be. What I do know is that conservatives have it wrong, even according to their own Bible. Take, for example, gender reconstruction surgery. We're told by conservatives that it's genital mutilation and that it's wrong. Well, if that's the case, then why did Jesus say otherwise? When Jesus was asked about eunuchs, why did he say that some were born that way, some were made that way, and some chose to become that way for the glory of God? Where in conservative rhetoric do the words of Jesus fit today? They don't. Conservatives simply ignore Christ on this topic. Why? Because in this instance, their Christ is inconvenient. In this instance, I can't be a Christian by their definition. I call myself a Quaker. When I did PaganFM, I was one voice on a radio, and on a podcast, I called myself a pagan. Today, conservative Christians would still call me a pagan. I'm not ashamed at all of that. I can be both. I'll wear both with pride. So why bring up my past on a reboot of Pagan FM? Firstly, there are of course some pagan groups that may act, as did the one that I was a part of, like cults. The cults that I was involved in, all of them, and the cults that are messing things up for all of us today share some things in common. But most importantly is the reason that I'm rebooting the show, and that is because of the current political situation, i.e., the cult of Trump. One well-known cult researcher, Stephen Hassan, wrote a book literally called The Cult of Trump, and he makes a compelling case that Donald Trump is a cult leader. And for any of us who have been involved in cults, it is obvious. There is no denying it. He is running this country in the same way that any cult leader runs their organizations. He runs it as if it is his own organization and as if every person and thing in this country are his to do with as he wishes. We see it in the way he demolished the East Wing of the White House, and the way he gets angry if someone he wishes to fire or prosecute isn't dealt with as he wishes. We see it when someone he pardons doesn't seemingly display enough gratitude and switch from Democrat to Republican. He acts as if he is beyond any rules, and this is how cult leaders act. Cult members are there for the service and pleasure of the leader, and cult leaders with enough power will do whatever they can get away with. When the cult leader becomes the president of the United States, obviously they will feel as if nothing is beyond them. And that is why I'm rebooting this show, now in particular. When I went off the air, it was pretty much at a high point. So many things had changed. While I was on the air, same-sex marriage had been legalized in the Obergefell versus Hodges Supreme Court decision, and some years prior, as New Hampshire had legalized same-sex marriage, Before that decision, I had the honor of performing one of the first same sex marriages in that state. In the pagan community, Circle Sanctuary had been instrumental in helping to have the pentacle recognized as a symbol of faith on gravestones of U.S. veterans. And Wicca was recognized as a religion in the U.S. Army Chaplain's Handbook. But just recently, Pete Hegseth, who styles himself as a Secretary of War, announced an overhaul of the Army's spiritual fitness manual because it doesn't talk enough about God, because it has too many New Age ideas in it. And I really fear that he will try to refocus on Christianity and eliminate Wicca and other religions and move towards a Christocentric military. This literally scares the hell out of me. What I see coming in this administration is a desire to rekindle something akin to the Holy Roman Empire, only under the styling of the New Apostolic Reformation. And that's something I'm willing to stand up against. I'm rebooting the show because in the past I had a voice, and I feel that voice is needed again. I can't sit by while I see so many things I struggled for being dismantled for the self gratification of an ignorant, self aggrandizing cult leader. And with that, whilst I let my blood pressure go down just a bit, let's hear something from S.J. Tucker that deals with that sort of similar blood pressure, and maybe Christopher Bingham and Celia. So here are Go Away, God Boy, Peace Now, and Celia's song Symbol coming up. So let's get those started. Oh. Inside my mind. It's a time now. Begin. Yeah, yeah. Oh, oh, I was blind. Just so and go. You for the invitation, but I'm on wanna have to love you. But when you're talking into there, oh, wonder or of that baby, of the away, that boy, and I told us and words on me. I was blind, but now I'll teach you the stars. Don't try to wrap your head around my heart full of big milk. I'll take you about 10 years down. My work can give you chills. Chill right between my face. Don't let me make you came after me at all. Whoa, whoa, yeah, that's you the ground, but deep down, but inside your so long, deep and down. My knees that way on you fly and down and resurrected. Oh, when God, boy, please don't make me ask again. Oh, I want to out and now. It's my turn.
Once a very long, long time ago, but beyond the time of king, lived a dragon who became a beast, grew too heavy for its wing. He threatened fire and death to all. He threatened many things. Though the townfolk brought from all around all the wealth that they could bring. Some of them were curious and they said, "What is it for?" And when they brought them all, his answer was to bring more. And by the way, they'll need your sons and daughters for the cat. Whoa. Hey now, hey now. One of the thieves now. Against the right. One now. It's time. One on one was that. Came a woman from the club town, the cave in which he lived. And at the entrance laid her body down, saying, "I shall not be moved." And she said, "I'll not cooperate. I will feed your cause no more. No matter what you do to me, I'll not feed your filthy war." And he snorted, and he snarled, and he bared his teeth with rage. And with his massive talons, he crushed her like an egg. And he roared, "There's a fun dance," and he shouted around and said, "For I said." But by just 100,000 stood behind the people couldn't hurt them if he tried. Saw determination, and he saw that it was true. And with the whole world watching, there was nothing he could do. And he stuck in his cave a while to wait for me. Just like you. And he's still there waiting for a silence or a agreement. For a time when he doesn't hear. Hey, hey, on it. We'll keep a little peace now. Peace now. About the peace now. Hey now, hey, hey. We need a little peace now. Hey, hey, right now. Why not a little peace now? Peace now, right now. We need a little peace now.
An American soldier came home today, wrapped up as cargo in an American flag. He asked for one sweet silent symbol on his grave, but the VA gun said, "Sorry, son, request denied." Well, he served as any other with his hands and with his heart. He prayed to Father Sky, he bowed down to Mother Earth. He honored air and water and the fire he danced around. But you didn't honor him before you put him in the ground. It's a symbol, it's science, that's all you remember. Excuse me, sir, I think you're unrejectable. Doctrine, it said, just in your faith, it's not a crime. So let this soldier rest, honor his request. You sent that little girl crying home from school. Told her she was evil and she disobeyed the rules. You took away her pendant, grandmother's gift. But the other kids are free to wear their crucifix. And she knows that if you catch her, that you'll have her expelled. She's raising every member of the family's going to hell. She's all messed up, she's 5 years old. She doesn't know her rights. But her daddy is a lawyer, so get ready for the fight. It's a sin, it's a sign, it's for everything to find. Sorry, sir, you're flat out wrong. I checked. Don't understand. I ran a tax train instead. Practicing your faith, it's not a crime. So if you make these children pray, let them do it their own way. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to stand up and fight for what we believe in. He's a believer and he wears it on his arm. First day new job, they set off all of the alarms. The memo spread like wildfire that the devil had arrived. And the virus got to corporate and it fired him by 5. Now all the smoke perception, and everyone runs scared. Scared of the neighbors and scared to declare. But the conclusions I expect are fired or denied. So what the hell did our ancestors fight so hard for? Oh, today's not lost at all. What makes you stay? Oh, I can't say all I can sing when you're so off the wall. You can hear what you believe. How he turned down and his blood grants him his death. Freedom of speech, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, freedom to stand and fight for what we believe in. Freedom of speech, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, freedom to stand and fight for what we believe in. Freedom of speech, freedom of faith, freedom of religion, freedom to stand for what we believe in. Freedom to stand for what we
So, thanks to S.J. Tucker with Go Away God Boy, Peace Now, Gaia Consort, aka Christopher Bingham and Company, and also known now as Bone Poets Orchestra, and Celia with Symbol. Powerful, powerful piece of music. So when I was doing Pagan FM, again, I'm a veteran. It wasn't really my choice to go into the military. Someone once asked, it's like, you were old enough, you sort of you volunteered, right? And it's like, they don't some people don't understand that when you grow up in a church like that and you're told to do something, you just do it. But anyway, when I was doing Pagan FM, one of my listeners was in the army and deployed to Iraq. And I got an email from him that was saying, and it just said, "Thank you for helping me through the deployment." And that just meant so much to me. That's that voice. Anyway, so thank you, Celia, for that song. One of the segments that I used to do on the show was the Practical Pagan. So I'm bringing that back. And tonight on the Practical Pagan, I want to talk about practical resistance. And if we're going to resist something, it's really important to know what we're resisting. So before I get into this, I'm going to offer something of a caveat. I'm going to get into a bit of Christianity, not because I think Christianity, especially in the sense that I'm going to be talking about it tonight, is in any way good, but rather because the sort of Christianity that I'm going to talk about is at the root of the problem that we're facing today. And just as a physician or a surgeon can't treat a tumor or an infection without understanding its nature, we aren't going to be able to deal with what's going on around us without understanding what it is and where it came from. The Trump regime, the Trump cult, is doing all they can to refashion this nation into the image, not of Trump, because Trump is too stupid to do this on his own. We know that Trump is too stupid because we can watch him in his signing ceremonies when he has these proclamations and executive orders read to him, and he sits there with the awareness of an agave worm at the bottom of a bottle of mezcal. Instead, what is happening to this country is being designed by, as I mentioned before, back in the days when Pagan FM was over the air, the New Apostolic Reformation, the family, and the conservative Christian groups. There's this thing called the Seven Mountains Mandate. It's part of Christian dominionism, and it seeks to control society by taking over 7 key areas. If you think that what I'm saying sounds a bit conspiratorial, I would ask you to look at the GOP today, or more specifically, the MAGA movement, and look what they're going after. Then look to the Seven Mountains Mandate. You can look it up online, look at the areas of society, look up Christian dominionism. It is a real thing. And there are 7 key areas of society that these groups, the 7 mountains as they call them, these areas are church and religion, family, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business and commerce. Each of these are areas that Trump has been seeking to gain control over. They're part of Project 2025. Each of these are areas that have been increasingly under pressure in the past 10 years and exponentially more so since Trump took office again. You can see how, when a corporation doesn't do as he wishes, he will sick one of his lackeys after them or threaten them or sue them. The New Apostolic Reformation is something of a separate group that holds a unique Christian viewpoint, also supremacist in ideology, but they believe they're new apostles hearing directly from God. These are the false prophets who were predicting that Trump would win in 2020 or saying that Trump was actually president in 2020. There are a number of these people surrounding Trump claiming that he's God's anointed. What we're fighting is a twisted and perverted form of Christianity that holds the power of the United States military, the United States Department of Justice, the United States court system, and so much more under its control. And pretty much this whole thing sort of began back in 1935 with a man by the name of Abraham Variety and a group called the Fellowship Foundation, DBA, the International Foundation, aka the Family. This isn't the New Apostolic Reformation. This is another organization. This was a group where leaders in government could attend Bible studies, prayer meetings, and spiritual formation and get some spiritual support. To expand their influence, they would have college kids offer to mow lawns of target Congress members and other powerful men in order to recruit these members into their sphere of influence. It was this group that began the National Prayer Breakfast, something the GOP now considers un-American or unchristian to forego, but which has only been going on since 1953. This group has been also involved in Russian prayer breakfasts. The fellowship was involved in the 1978 Camp David Accords with Jimmy Carter and has conducted private diplomacy in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan, claiming at times to have been acting on behalf of Congress. It is, as some listeners might understand, illegal for private citizens to act on behalf of the United States without authorization. Something called the Logan Act forbids this. Some might argue, if something good comes of it, isn't it good? The problem is that when private citizens act on behalf of the country, how can we be certain they aren't putting their own interests ahead of the interests of the country? In this case, how can we be certain that the fellowship isn't putting the religious agenda of the fellowship ahead of the national interests of the United States? They may be doing what they believe is right, but are the particular religious beliefs of a particular sect what is best for a diverse nation? In Uganda, it was Fellowship Associates David Bahati and Saba Buturo who were behind a bill that called for the death penalty for homosexuality, with Bahati saying that it was a conversation with members of the fellowship in 2008 that were the inspiration for that legislation. I spoke of this on Pagan FM at the time. 123 C Street in Washington, D.C., a former convent for the nearby church, became ground zero for a scandal in 2009 when South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford spoke openly about receiving counseling, having been asked hard questions there. That was when C Street and the fellowship, received the scrutiny it didn't want. Still, though, it acts as perhaps the largest lobby that isn't a lobby in the United States. It's a fellowship, not a lobby. It speaks of morals, not acting on behalf of corporations. So, for some reason, its influence on lawmakers doesn't count as a lobbying effort, as would actual churches and such. To say that the fellowship is secretive is an understatement. The former leader, Doug Coe, didn't want his name out in public. The current leader, Catherine Crane, is listed as the president, but you can find little information about her on a Google search. But that's how they want it. That's not the whole of it. Another aspect comes down to the doctrine of biblical inerrancy. This is something that was somewhat articulated in the early days of Christianity, but which really didn't come into its own in this country until, believe it or not, about 1978. While early leaders of the Christian church believed the Bible to be true, the definition of the word true meant something different. It could mean something that was held dear, something important, something to live by, but it didn't necessarily mean that one had to believe that the world was created in a literal 6 days. You can look at the early church creeds like the Nicene Creed and things like that, and even they don't require you to believe in the flood, in a 6-day creation, and that sort of thing. It didn't necessarily mean there was a little literal Adam and a literal Eve, but over the years, control over people implied control over their thoughts. That's what cults do. Cults require, as Stephen Hassan, whom we spoke of before, mentions in something he calls the bite model, control over our beliefs, information, thoughts, and emotions. If they can convince us that the Bible is true literally, they have control over our beliefs. If they convince us that the mainstream media is corrupt, they control our information. I can go on at some other point about thoughts and emotions, but as you can see here, you can see that this is how it's starting to shape up. At some point, I'll talk about Isaac Bonowitz's ABCDEF, which is the Advanced Bonowitz Advanced Bonowitz Cult Danger Evaluation Frame. That was an interesting look at cults as well. In any case, it was in 1978 that the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy was signed by about 200 ministers, and that became the framework for fundamentalist preaching to this day. Some notable signers included even people I wouldn't have expected, but there are many names who are recognizable even today, including Josh McDowell, Hal Lindsey, R.C. Sproul, D. James Kennedy, John F. MacArthur, and many others. In total, around 200 signers. This belief in biblical inerrancy unfortunately locks in a particularly dogmatic understanding of Christian scripture. It labels liberal Christians who recognize scripture that scripture may well be allegorical as heretics. It leaves no room for a larger conversation. It leaves no room for connection to other faiths. It leaves no room for dialogue. So where does all this leave us? How are we to challenge the current status quo? Firstly, I think we need to look at the tactics that were used by the family back in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. They gained power by building relationships with people in power. They were clever. Being angry is one thing, being clever is another. We need relationships. We need to build relationships the same way that the fellowship did. It's easy to be afraid of people you don't know, especially when they're angry. It's much more difficult to be afraid of people you know and people you like, even if they're gay, even if they're trans, even if they're pagan. We need relationships with people in power. We need relationships with clergy. We need relationships with Christians. And we need to help them question what they believe about us. We need to help them understand that they can believe what they believe while understanding that they don't have to make our existence illegal. They can believe what they believe and welcome the immigrant. They can love God, and that can help them love other people. And sooner or later, they might open their eyes to the lies they have been told, to the lies that they have believed. Secondly, we need to hold accountable those we can. I've seen restaurants who refuse to serve ICE agents. I give them kudos. We shouldn't serve or grant accommodations to those who are doing evil. Anyone who chooses to do evil, even if that evil is legal, should be held to account. If they can't be held to account under the law, then they can be held to account socially. Society decides what is socially acceptable. If a bunch of ICE officers came into my shop, I wouldn't serve them. I'm sorry, officers. I don't serve people who scare my customers. I don't serve people who brutalize others. I don't serve people who violate the civil rights of others. If you don't want to be that confrontational, I'm sorry, fellas, I was just closing up. Thirdly, in social media, those who do shameful things are shamed. There's an FAFO way of going about things. People are being caught on camera doing racist things and losing jobs. Fine. I saw a woman being racist at a pizza place. Her order was canceled and she was told to leave. We need more of that. Just because we have a racist president, this is not license for everyone to be racist. Social media can help us be aware of where ICE is, where DHS is, and what they're doing. And if they're in the area, we can prepare, warn restaurants, warn hotels, warn everyone, resist. Fourthly, organize. The government is working hard to prevent and prosecute organization, to the point that they are declaring Antifa, a loose coalition rather than an organized group, as a terrorist organization. Their proof? Similar signage. They pressured Apple to remove the app IceBlock from the App Store, and they fired the creator's wife from her government job, saying that she had endangered the lives of ICE agents because her husband created the app. If she had actually endangered anyone, she would have been prosecuted. The fact that she wasn't is proof that the Trump administration is nothing but liars trying to punish anyone in their way. In short, the current regime is out for political retribution, however they can get it. Organizing is important, but it can have consequences. Those of us who might organize can expect to experience consequences. But we have inspiration, such as Boudica, who, though she was ultimately not successful in completely overthrowing Rome, quite nearly did so in AD 60-61. I'm not suggesting that any of us will lead revolts against Trump or his goons that will be remembered in another 2,000 years. Indeed, it is my distinct hope that Trump himself will not be remembered at all, even 100 years from now, let alone 1 to 2,000 years from now. But we can take inspiration from a woman who suffered an injustice and did something about it, from a woman who saw her daughters suffer and said, "This shall be avenged." When I was in the Air Force, I knew that it was my duty to not follow an illegal order. Following an order that I knew to be illegal was a crime. As a civilian, I recognize a similar principle. A law or an executive order that violates the Constitution is also illegal. When ICE is violating due process, what they're doing is illegal. When Trump issues executive orders that violate the Constitution, then perhaps it's time for us to organize, to find attorneys who are willing to stand up for those who are willing to stand up against tyranny. Perhaps it's time for Team Boudica to rise up again. Perhaps it's time for some of us to ignore or flout executive orders and illegal laws that violate the Constitution and human rights. I don't yet know what this looks like or how or where it might be done, but illegal orders are simply that, illegal and unconstitutional. Right now, let's hear from Daniel Kelly with New Year, and then Crow Woman with Long, Long Night, and then one more from Gaia Consort with Cold Winter Coming. So here is Daniel Kelly. Oops, let's see. Right here.
South of Cape Stiff, and the last night of the year, in the hooker made of Judah, we had hard and scanty cheer, with the water to the funny frame, and a wind that cuts you through. out went the old year, and in come the new. Oh, every ship in harbour is striking her bell, and every steamer's siren blowing off like hell. They be passing round the bottle and singing old lang syne, and all the young brass bounders kicking up a shine. But the galley fire was out, and we'd very near forgot the feel of something dry and the taste of something hot, with salt beef to bite on and solid crack to chew. Oh, out went the old year, and in come the new. Of Cape Cliff, in the darkness and the cold, in come the new year, and now and the old. Close beside my elbow, I heard my Murphy say, oh, this year's so help me, I'm going to save my pay. Yes, this year's so help me, I'm going to save my pay. It's a long, it's a long, in a long, it's a long, it's a long, in a long, it's a long, it's a long, it's in a long, long, it's a long, it's a long, long we journey through the darkness. It brings us inside in a long, long night. It's a long, long night. It's a long, we journey through the darkness. It brings us inside in a long night. There's a man on the corner with a crooked tooth grin, and a silk top hat with my pin, and a crystal ball in his cake. Says cold winds coming in, on, and the beat is the moon snow. Wait, wait, like a girl. Cold winds coming. Cold winds coming and going, and a girl of in the violet woods. Found a man on the corner, nowhere to be found. And he might even be in the cold, hard ground. And all the time was speculation around. It's a cold wind that's coming and it's gonna be. It's man, yeah. Cold wind that's coming in. With and when the Lord burning to my chair. Cold wind coming and I'm trying. If we can just if there's life out in the stars, do they turn their eyes to us? Do we look serene? Do we look so clear? A tiny dot way out in space, the whole the human race. Things they aren't going so well down here. Others seem to remain shore. The highest peak to the forest floor. All creatures great and all creatures small. How can we believe we own it all? How can we believe that we own it all? Turn on the TV, what do I see? Politicians who disagree, the not free, overthrown. Sometimes I think that this world's insane. But then when I look again, I see the only madness is our own. From the sea to the shore, the highest peak to the forest floor. All creatures great and all creatures small. How can we believe that we only know? How can we believe that we only I can't believe it's true. Is this the best that we can do? So be the first, put down the stone. Just like the birds up in the sky and the fish in the ocean wide. Know that this is our one and only home. Others seem to alien shore. From highest peak to the forest floor. All creatures great and all creatures small. How can we believe that we own it all? How can we believe that we own it all? Others seem to familiar shore. And highest peak to the forest floor. All creatures great and all creatures we own it all. How can we believe that we own it all?
Dark sunlight and shining moon, balance of the dark and light, harmony of witches rune as we perform the sacred rite. By earth and water, air and so we come to let all that is hidden now be found. We sense a candle at the soul and ringing of the altar bell. We tie our knots within our cord to find our magic in the spell. Another voice that feels God is soon. Join with us as one feels, dance with us, our choose our own. While the summer and dew unto to songs without sweet welcome you, dance with us as dance with us, our witches rule. Dance with us, our witches rule. Oh, dance with us, our witches rule. Mother of the field, goddess of the silver moon, join with us as power blooms. Dance with us, our witches rune. Father of the summer, so all the snows will let us live. Dance with us as dance with us, as wishes. Dance with us, our wishes. Dance with us, dance with us, our wishes. By all the light of the sun, by all the might of the sea, chant the rune and it is done. As we will, so would it be.
All right. So, started that set off with New Year by Daniel Kelly and his October 2025 release, Ghosts in Deptford, which kind of hits close to home for me because I live just a couple miles away from Deptford, New Jersey, named after that same town. This album is his setting of the poetry of Cicely Fox Smith, who was born in Cheshire in 1882. In the liner notes, Daniel thanks Charles Ipcar and James Seville for collecting and publishing her collected works, so I think we can thank them as well. After that was Crow Woman with A Long, Long Night from their album Seasons, A Pagan Journey Around the Wheel. Then was Gaia Consort with Cold Winter Coming from their album Evolve. Next, we heard How Can We Believe We Own It All by Dave the Bard from his album Raise the Flag of Green. And last in that set was Witch's Rune by S.J. Tucker from her album Blessings. I remember quite a few years back when S.J. was at WSCA when I was there doing the show from there, and she played that song live. One of the listeners was John McNair, a really talented musician from Australia, and he messaged me asking, "Who is that ridiculously ridiculously talented woman who's singing on your show. At some point, we'll be hearing from John too, not tonight, but soon. One other story about John some years ago, I used to take part in an annual benefit concert called the Irish Show up in New Hampshire. It was a benefit for an orphanage. And one year, the woman who was the director wanted a more international flair and asked what I could do other than purely Irish music. So I said, how about a French song by a Scottish musician from Australia? And that year I did John's song, Nous sommes les enfants du soleil, or We are the children of the sun. It's a beautiful piece. And who knows, maybe I'll play it next week. But moving on, so I'm going to see how often I can do reviews, but this week's review, it is the Jane Austen Tarot published by the Bookshop Limited of New York with illustrations by Alessandro Baldricchi. And while perusing the shelves of my local Barnes & Noble, I happened upon a tarot deck I hadn't seen before. And loving the work of Jane Austen and having worked with the tarot somewhat, this deck caught my attention. Like most actual tarot decks, this one has a full 78 cards consisting of both the major and minor arcana. However, the minor arcana differs just a bit in that instead of wands, cups, swords, and pentacles, this deck has writing crops, hearts, quill pens, and swords. The major arcana keeps the same names of the cards, but the characters are all taken from the novels. The Hanged Man, for example, has 2 men in the background and a woman in the foreground, and nobody physically hanging, at least not in the sense that can be ascertained from the image alone. But in reading the accompanying text, we find that the image is of Marianne Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. After having fallen in love with John Willoughby, John leaves for London and stops returning her letters. Marianne learns that he has married another woman, and in her grief, she falls ill. She comes to realizing that her feelings have contributed to her illness. She also realizes that another man, whom she had dismissed, was kind and honorable, and she accepts his proposal for marriage. What we have is a version of the lesson of the major arcana of the tarot, retold using the stories of Jane Austen. In that sense, I find it clever. However, I find the symbolism does not go as far as the Rider-Waite deck, in part because I don't believe the artist was necessarily an actual occultist. On the other hand, it brings to life Jane Austen's novels. The weaker part, though, is in the minor arcana. In the traditional decks, each card told a story. In this deck, the 3 of coins is simply 3 coins. The 10 of quill pens is simply 10 quill pens, and so on. Someone who's acquainted with the tarot could still use this deck to do a reading. Someone who becomes acquainted with this deck and works with it, it could work with it. But the Rider-Waite deck can often tell the story just by looking at the cards, just through intuition. So rich is the artwork. But again, this deck, it's Jane Austen. And the accompanying text, though brief, does find room for a brief biography, as well as a description of the cards and a tutorial for the use. So, final score, would I recommend them? As a primary deck for doing readings, probably not. But to have in a collection, especially for someone who likes Jane Austen, it's a definite yes. So another thing I might do in the show is a little segment called Oppression Watch. I don't know if I'll do it every week, but there's something that I heard of recently. This one comes from Fair and Balanced, The Mirror, and other sources. And it was just reported that the state of Texas is now compiling something of a registry of trans people. Those who may have requested gender markers to be updated on licenses other than for clerical errors are being reported to some mysterious agency via an email address, and that agency has not been forthcoming in regard to inquiries as to its purpose. The state of Texas is one of the most repressive to trans individuals, requiring that those using public restrooms use only those aligned with their birth sex. And birth sex is defined only as relating to genitalia at birth, which really kind of makes me wonder what about the people who are born with no genitalia, which does happen. According to Texas, there is only male and female, so I guess that us intersex people and definitely trans identities simply don't exist. So while there are some okay and accepting cities in Texas, Austin pretty much for one of them, Texas is probably going to have to be avoided by any decent people. And the Pagan FM Almanac will be back. So here it is. Today is the first day of the year with a waxing gibbous moon, 98% illuminated. The wolf moon will be on Saturday, January 3rd, and it will be a supermoon. Today, January 1st, is Capricorn, a sign known for ambition, determination, and resourcefulness. I find this is an interesting date for rebirthing Pagan FM. And really, given the hoops that I ran through today to even get this show up, given a defective mixing board and other things that happened, I guess I did have to exercise some resourcefulness. So, yay. Capricorn is the sea goat, the half goat, half fish, ruled by Saturn, the planet of discipline and responsibility. While Capricorn can be ambitious, disciplined, loyal, and patient, she can be pessimistic, unforgiving, condescending, and overcautious. Capricorn likes family, traditions, quality, music, and results, and dislikes inefficiency and aimlessness. And the herb of the week, sage or Salvia officinalis. Common sage is one of my favorites. It's a member of the mint family, but it has been a frequent part of Canadian cooking, commonly found in meat stuffing or pork pie or tourtière, which is a kind of family dish. It's an evergreen native to the Mediterranean region, but it has become naturalized worldwide. Historically, Romans referred to it as the holy herb, and it has been used in religious rituals for snake bites, as an anesthetic, as styptic, for women's fertility, and other uses. It was used as a recipe in Four Thieves vinegar or vinaigre de quatre voleurs, which was a French recipe used externally when approaching someone who had the plague in order to ward off the disease. I'm not certain that I would trust this, but then again, it was something in an age when there was nothing. Sage is considered an essential herb in old world cooking, along with parsley, rosemary, and thyme, as in the song Scarborough Fair, evidenced by my French Canadian family cookery, but it's also part of Italian, Balkan, and Middle Eastern cuisine. An article in Wikipedia notes a sage and onion stuffing for turkey, one which I haven't yet tried, but which does sound interesting. Spiritually, sage is used for cleansing negative energy, for purification, and for enhancing intuition. You'll see it used in many different traditions. If you're interested in growing herbs that have multiple uses, you'll be hard pressed to find one that has more. Or if you simply want an interesting herb in your kitchen collection, moving toward kitchen witchery, there are a few more versatile. So let's get into a little more music. Here is something from Looping Star. Uh, People we loved were here all along. So we heard Looping Star from their album Folktronica Remastered with The People We Loved Were Here All Along. And that was followed by Mayfair Grin with Antarctic Public Radio Weather Girl Mix from their album The Hibiscus Gallery. Most of the artists you heard tonight are on Bandcamp, with the exception of Featherscale and Gaia Consort, also known as Bone Poets Orchestra. The latter you can find at bonepoets.org, and you can hear Featherscale. A lot of their music is still on YouTube. Coming up next week, I think I want to talk a bit about our bodies and physical fitness. Touching that, we'll be looking at Dion Fortune's book, Sea Priestess, one that touched me in my early days as a pagan, perhaps because I could relate to a character who dealt with breathing issues, particularly asthma. And since I announced the reboot of the program, I've been in touch with some artists I've not yet heard, so you'll likely hear from some of these people as well. And if there's something you want me to cover, please let me know. Again, you can reach me at Deirdre, Deirdre, at designed, DEESIGNED.net. With that, I'm going to close today's show, and I'm going to try to make this weekly. It's a lot of work, hours of researching and writing, but I'll see what I can do. Looking at the time, 11. Wow. What's amazing is that I pretty much hit the time pretty much spot on. Anyways, I plan on being here live from Saturdays 10 to midnight, so I will see you on January 10th. I'd like to do one on the 3rd, but I just don't have the time to be able to do that. Our outro tonight is Hail and Farewell by Featherscale. When this first came out, I was blown away, firstly with the vocals of Mike Dolan and Jenna Green, put together with the incredible production skills of Robert McClung. Anyways, I will see you on Saturday the 10th from 10 to midnight. And here we go. Come on.
Cry we meet, marry on. Be together, we are one. So, then you thank for the breath, show that you have all the words, and thanks for the laugh and sorrow we shared. Wishing they turn hell. Marry me needs, marry me hard. Need again, we are well. So we declare some way. Filling you my head. in burning we I know I can I could have you on my it's where the road has go. Thanks so much. Smoke. Rest on the shut and rock. Yeah, we need every being very well. So we have the particle is in my head. I will marry we meet, marry we part, meet again, marry as well. So we declare, marry we invest, marry we part, meet again, well, we declare the hell, but